everybody. Welcome to the second episode of Two Peas in a Podcast. So today we're going to be discussing the very obvious and factual opinion that I have that humanity should basically be exterminated for the good of all. And the world would be better off without us. And I still find it unbelievable when people disagree with me about this. So that's our topic today. We've already had a slightly heated conversation about this, slightly drunken conversation as well. So it didn't really end very conclusively, but we're here to either pick up or have this conversation in a more followable way. So there you go.
I'm taking the opposite position here, that humanity should stay and that there's a good moral case for humanity sticking around. And my case is entirely based on the future. I kind of agree with Delphine at the moment. I don't know if you know this, that if the future was going to be the same as the present is and as the past has been, then I'd say, get rid of humanity. My argument rests on the idea that the only creatures capable of reducing the amount of net suffering in the world and increasing the amount of joy and pleasure and happiness and all of those good emotions is us. And I think that's the reason why we should stick around. So maybe we could start off with that then. Do you disagree with that, I suppose, is the first thing?
Yeah, just because we can doesn't mean we will.
Right. You think we probably won't?
Yeah, I don't think we will.
So
I feel like this is going to be a very short conversation.
Me too. We've zoomed right to the point number 10 in a list.
Yeah. So I didn't know that you just agreed with me that at this point it would be better if we never existed.
Yeah, I think there is more suffering than there is happiness in the world. Like if you think of how most people live, like 7 billion people, how many of them really thinking about it would rate their lives as being worth living? How many would if they could choose to be born versus not to have been born? Because that's what we're talking about as well. We're not talking like when you said at the start there, exterminating humanity. You weren't talking about going through with a gun and shooting everybody and having loads of misery and stuff. Maybe you were, I don't know. But what we're kind of trying to get at is the idea that let's say everybody could be instantly exterminated in their sleep and all their pets and everybody who cares about them goes as well. So in other words, there is zero net suffering in this getting rid of the people, right? So people just disappear basically. And is that right or wrong? And I agree with you that at the moment it's the right thing to do. If every moment in the future was going to be like every moment in the present and the past, just based on my belief that you share, that there's more suffering than what would we say the opposite of suffering is? Just well-being? Because people will say happiness isn't the point and that isn't the point. But we can probably sum it all up in well-being.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So we have the potential for existing for billions of years and for creating, not necessarily as humans, but as creatures who can suffer and feel joy and so on. And it may be that billions of years of joyful, creative, happy, well-being type existence outweighs the suffering that we've experienced so far and the suffering that other animals on the planet experience.
Well, I would agree with that. Like if we were to know that we would live for even just 1 billion years, which is longer than we've been around. How long have we been around?
It depends where you draw the line. It's like saying when do you become an adult. But I think the estimates are generally like 200,000 years.
Oh, okay. So even if we were to spend 1 million years here, and I made a timeline, so I'm
nice.
looking at it now.
Is this for Sapiens?
Homo sapiens, 300,000 years ago.
Right.
So let's say 1 million years is totally fine. That would compensate. But it would take a lot of, because it wouldn't eradicate. I feel like that's not going to happen.
Wait, explain what's not going to happen.
This weird utopia you have in mind for the future.
It's not a weird utopia, it's a great utopia.
It's a surrealist utopia. I mean, because First of all, I don't know if we can survive that long. I mean, okay, do you agree that in order to survive that long, we need to solve the climate crisis?
Yes.
Do you even see how much we have our feet in our asses about this thing?
Yeah.
And it's been like, we've known about it for like over 100 years, and it's been a big deal for like 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's just like,
yeah, I agree. And I know a lot of people have said that we're at like a bottleneck type point, and that if we get through the next 100 or 200 or 300 years, then our chances are a lot better, because we face a number of challenges now that are global, and we're only getting used to being a global civilization. So if you look at global warming, the nuclear proliferation crisis, which is apparently at its worst point it's ever been, minutes to midnight, which is worse than it was at the height of the Cold War, which is why I'm suspicious of it.
I don't know that expression.
The Atomic Energy Authority, or basically, the point is, it's a clock that is set by scientists every year or every few years. The point is, it's not counting down necessarily, but it gives an indication, depending on how close it is to midnight, of the chance of the annihilation of civilization due to nuclear war. And I think initially it was due to nuclear war only, and now other things have been added in, like the risk of a pandemic, the risk of cyber warfare starting off some kind of normal war. Climate change has been included as well, bioterrorism. They've included a load of different things which could end civilization. So it's no longer just about nuclear. But it has varied between something like what it is now, which I think is a minute or less than a minute until midnight, which is very dire, all the way up to something like 15 or 14 minutes to midnight, which isn't great either on a scale of a whole day. But
it's always the end of the world.
yeah, it's always the end of the world, which is why I'm not sure about it either. But the point is, I totally accept that we're at a very close point to destroying the world. But if it's only going to take 300 years to get through that, let's do 300 years of it. Let's see if we get through. If we've solved climate change, we'll know in 300 years we've solved climate change, because it's going to hit us before then. And it's already starting to hit us. So if we make it through 300 years and climate change, we've solved it, then who knows what awaits on the other side. And by that point, our technology will be so advanced that we'll be better equipped not only to tackle the problems that we have to face to get through that 300 years, but we'll be better equipped to hack our own psyche and change our own societies. We'll have more data on what makes people happy. It won't answer the philosophical questions of what's the ultimate meaning of life, or what should we pursue at some deep level. But I think any chance that we'll get through that and have a net positive life for most people is worth pursuing, because it means billions of years of net positive existence, which would negate the suffering that we've just had there. It's a maths argument, is my argument, based entirely on my own biases and speculation.
Okay, I can get behind that. I can see a world, because a nuclear disaster is a bit different, but like climate change isn't going to wipe us all out. It's going to wipe out billions of us, but it's not going to kill the last human. Unless, I mean, even if the whole world gets covered in water, we'll just make a boat and eat fish. And, like exactly. We've done it before. But so yeah, I guess I could imagine that the civilization that's gone through that's so much smaller in numbers thanks to climate change, and has experienced it, so knows what mistakes not to, because I think, history repeats itself, but I think people would know to not make that repeat itself. So yeah, I could see that being a better world, but then the suffering of those 300 years is gonna take a long time to compensate for.
Really?
First of all, well, yeah, because climate change isn't like a fun, like doomsday kind of death. It's like slowly. It starts with immigration, basically, which is already a disaster.
Terrible.
Well, yeah.
Because it's not a fun way to go. It starts with immigration.
Okay, listen.
This is why we've been taken off Spotify, why we've been taken off all these apps. They won't host our podcast. It's because of comments like that.
I'm sorry, I'll censor myself. It's actually more, it's not immigration, it's actually refugees.
Even worse.
Well, that's the thing. So that's, people like Emmett are going to come out and be loud.
People like you were going to come out with your shotgun, gunning them down at the border.
Yeah, finally.
An excuse.
Yeah. No, okay. It's going to start with refugees. People who are displaced by their friggin' inundations and famines and all that crap. Yeah. And that's going to bring out the worst of the privileged, mainland countries that are not underwater, who are going to try and kick everyone off the boat at the very beginning. So loads of people are going to die. And then the world is going to be even more overpopulated because it's going to be so cramped. There's not going to be any space. And that's when the famine's going to kick in. And famine is not a cool way to die, dude. Like, the millions and hundreds of millions and maybe billions of people who are going to die of famine are going to, the really painful things about dying of hunger. Well, they're also going to die of thirst. Yeah, the water shortage is going to, there's going to be a global civil war over water, fresh water. Unless in the meantime we have the technology to,
desalinate.
Yeah.
Because we'll have a lot of salt water at that point.
Yeah, and everyone's going to be continuing to fight over money because I don't think that's going to just end. And, yeah, it's going to be a fucking disaster, just from a civil sense and from a biological sense. It's going to be one of the most painful waves of extinction. And it's going to end with people who've suffered so much. And you know what hurt people do? They hurt people. And it's going to be friggin' it's going to be ugly. It's going to be really, really shit. And then the people who survive will be like, okay, we've learned our lesson, but they're not going to have the same kind of privileged values that we have. Philosophy and ethics and all that stuff comes from, a lot of the time, it comes from having the time and the privilege of being able to think about it. And that's going to be gone. And a lot of the innovative technology and all that fun stuff when you're living on a boat trying to survive on algae.
Honestly, this all sounds like a nightmare and a bad dream that you have. I don't think that's the consensus of how the world is going to die because of climate change.
How do you think it's going to go?
I mean, definitely immigration is something that's going to happen on a huge scale that we've never had before, because Bangladesh is going to flood and loads of different countries. Florida is going to be underwater, the country of Florida. Actually, it wouldn't be so bad if Florida went underwater after the election.
Hey, Disney World is there.
All the more reason to get rid of it. We'll see a lot of this coming before it happens, and there will be economists who do cost-benefit analyses, and they'll find out, okay, how much do we have to pay to put up walls around these cities? How much do we have to pay for flood prevention or for relocation? They'll do an analysis of this, many of them, and they'll find out that there are cheaper ways of doing it than having an influx of immigrants into wealthy Western countries, which would just destabilize the entire world economy. It's so horrendous a scenario that I just think it must be prevented. And the lengths that people will go through economically to prevent it will be huge. So I don't think that, clearly our handling of this pandemic has just been awful. So I don't have that much faith in a coordinated effort to solve big problems like this, but I ought to have some faith. And my argument doesn't rest on my absolute certainty that we'll get through this, only that there's a chance, and that chance, that small chance, call it a 10% chance, multiplied by billions of years of happiness, that's worth it. What's with the eye roll? Are you eye rolling the chance or the billions of years or the happiness?
I'm all of it. Isn't it kind of selfish to trade past people's suffering for future people's happiness?
No, I think it's selfless. It's the opposite. It's saying we'll suffer so that you can live. We're basically Jesus.
Lol. I don't know, man.
Well, tell me how
I
it's
don't know.
selfish to say that we'll suffer so that you can be happy.
Because the sufferers didn't consent to suffering for this.
True.
And they don't get to reap the benefits.
Yep.
And the people one day are just gonna be like, oh yay, everything's great. They didn't earn it.
Should you have to earn happiness?
Well, I don't know. I feel like maybe I don't know if the net. No, okay, it's fine. It's fine. I have to stay in the framework of the like net happiness
Yeah.
objective.
Because it's right though, not because it's just on my terms. Like, wouldn't you agree that the net happiness like framework for viewing this is the best?
Yeah, I also have a problem.
Okay.
I kind of I don't really want to include human happiness in that.
Why?
Because when you said net, well-being or net suffering, I thought of like just the world. Like I feel like because in this argument, I kind of see humanity as like a closed cycle that does a lot of things that only affects itself.
Okay.
But if they didn't exist, that whole chunk of the equation would just disappear. And so if we're talking about whether humanity should exist or not, I feel like that chunk should stay a closed cycle, and that we should be looking at, considering animal happiness.
I agree that we should consider all happiness, not just human happiness.
Yeah. Do I think we should consider only animal happiness?
Why?
Non-human animals.
Why not humans?
Because imagine humans can have so much net well-being that it overcompensates the fact that animals are still suffering as much as now.
Yeah, that's a really tough problem. But imagine that that's not the case. It could be the case that if we become happy enough, we decide to raise the happiness of other animals. I mean, we already are doing that to an extent. Like the happier humans become, it seems, or at least the more prosperous they become, the more they're concerned about the well-being of other humans and other creatures. Like who is it that's doing, who is it? Oh yeah, who is doing conservation efforts? It's the wealthy countries. Who donates the most to charity? The wealthy countries. The people who can already afford to look after themselves and then have a little bit left over to look after other people.
Oh my god, that's so not true. That's
You don't
so
think so?
unbelievably not true on so many levels. Okay, first of all, if you look over time, back before nowadays, humans had less to take care of themselves and stuff, and they had less progress and everything, but animals were a lot happier because they just lived on farms like normal animals. They didn't live in industrialized cages like they do now. And if there's animal protection things that have come up lately, it's not because we got better, it's because their treatment got worse.
I would say it's both. I mean, compare animals in 1950 to animals now. There was massive factory farming in 1950 as well, and very little animal rights activism. All the
No one knew about it.
Yeah, but once we learned about it, we changed it. It didn't have to get worse from the 1950s for us to do something about it. We learned about it, and because we have an innate drive to help other creatures, we tried to do something about it.
Yeah, but it wasn't our prosperity or the advancement of the economy or anything that made us like that.
I don't know.
It's the worsening of the animal condition that made us act like that.
I think if you took all the starving parts of the world and you fed them with factory food, they would have far less qualms about it than many people in the West have about factory food, simply because they need it for their survival. And we don't. And because we're more prosperous, we're in a position to reject factory farmed food on that basis.
No, I just don't buy it. I don't. And also, I don't think richer people help more. They absolutely don't. When a rich person helps, they help more because they have more to give. But like, there's so many. Have you not heard? I don't have a country in mind. It might be like Croatia in the 1980s or like Benin in Africa. People I know who've gone to poorer countries and have like stayed with really, really poor people, like in Benin where you don't eat meat. because it's just too expensive. They bought meat for my friends and just gave it to them and refused to eat it because it was like for the guests, you know. And a lot of the times poor people are a lot less hung up on their money. Yeah, they're much more generous with what they have.
Sure, that's true. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if it is as clear cut as you're making it, because it just makes sense to me that if we get wealthier and wealthier, that we'll be more concerned and have more time to be concerned about the well-being of other creatures, including other humans, but also other animals. Like, there's already a massive movement. Like, we have that same impulse in us, like we wealthy countries, that the poorer countries have with sharing meat and everything. That's just a human impulse. And
where do you see that in our countries?
Well, we adopted a dog from the pound. The pound exists not to make profit, but to give shelter to dogs who have been abandoned or are in bad situations. Lots of people go vegan for moral reasons. It's really taking off now. There's companies whose entire purpose is to develop vegan, non-animal suffering meats.
Okay.
Like, these companies wouldn't exist if there wasn't huge money to be made from many people who they believe would make the switch from animal meat to non-animal meat if they could do it, and who would do it on the basis of the proposed reduction in suffering. If you could choose, like, pay a fiver for, I don't know how much a steak costs, pay a fiver for a cow steak versus pay a fiver for a lab-grown steak, and they're, you know, molecularly identical, you'd go for the lab-grown steak because it tastes the same and it's cruelty-free. And the fact that you would choose that in the first place means that there's an instinct in you which is purpose towards reducing suffering. My point here is that if we increase our own prosperity, if we make ourselves wealthier, which we will do over time, we have been doing it really well for the last few hundred years, then there will come a point where the better angels of our nature will allow us to act in more ethical ways. We're already seeing that, and we've seen it a lot in the last few hundred years. Like, the world is such a better place to live in now than it was 100 years ago. And people act better towards each other now than they did 100 years ago. Just think of the situation for Black people or women. It's so much better than it was. And this has been led by technological advancements as well as cultural shifts and revolutions. And these are just only going to continue. And that's really good. And it's a sign of progress, and it's a symptom of progress that these kind of things happen. And extrapolate that out 500 years, we could be in a really good way. We mightn't have solved everything in 500 years, but we'll know a lot more about what it takes to live in a big society with many people. So yeah, there's my utopian vision.
You paint a very nice picture.
Well, tear it down.
I don't want to. I mean, I guess it's true that overall we do care more about ethics now than we used to. I don't think that has to do with wealth.
Okay.
Because if you look at wealthy people, they're no better people than poor.
Well, look at it on a societal wide level.
I don't know, man. I don't think rich society is a better place to be than middle class society.
But you're looking at classes within a society rather than society now versus society 100 years ago.
Yeah, but there's more than just money that changed.
But I'm saying that the changes in culture, like the changes in society, are probably related to changes in wealth.
Yeah, related partly, I think, but
yeah.
not entirely.
No. But whether it's wealth or not, it could just be whatever is causing the change in human values that we like over the past few hundred years. Let's just say whatever that is, it continues into the next 500 years. We can take wealth out of it.
Yeah, no, that would be great. But I know why I feel taken aback is because we've lost sight of the people we were talking about, which is non-human animals.
Yeah.
Who are not happier now than 100 years ago.
No. But maybe, again, this is my point, maybe in 200 years or in 100 years, when we're out of our current reliance on them. I agree, it's awful. I think it's terrible. And I think we'll look back on factory farming like we currently look back on slavery. Mm-hmm. We'll just be like, how the hell did they do that? And not mind about it. Most people don't really care. And I still eat meat. I can't boast about it. I know I'm doing a wrong thing by eating meat. So we'll get past it though, and it will have been horrible, and there'll be better thing in the future.
I think that's why I used the word selfish earlier, because you're like, well, it's okay that all these animals are suffering now for the slim chance that we're going to make it so much better.
Yeah, I think it's like a multiplication thing there, where if you take a slim chance and you multiply it by a lot of well-being, it does actually make it worthwhile.
But are other animals even able to enjoy enough happiness to make up for all the misery they're going through now?
I would say so. I mean, we don't know what kind of happiness animals are capable of. I mean, just imagine if you could have a really happy pig, and imagine a billion pigs being happy for a billion years. It's a lot of happiness. And you could, I mean, like a civilization that was entirely focused on the well-being of its participants would literally hook up people and animals to machines which send them signals which make them happy for eternity. That's a kind of a dystopian image. But imagine that that happened in a way that it wasn't machines hooked up to animals and people, but existing in life, like a way of moving and behaving in the world, which brought about the same outcome. So imagine, the way video games, for example, or like strategy games or whatever you're into, are really engaging and fun and happy making or well-being making. The Sims for you, right? That's just a source of great enjoyment. And imagine that life was like that, you didn't have to go into a game to get that, but life itself was as fulfilling as the most possibly fulfilling game you could imagine, with characters from real life. You're interacting with real people. It's not just the Sims and thing, but this is real life with other people, and you're having fulfilling and passionate and well, just happy times with people. To me,
But
that's imagine.
but this already exists, Emmett.
It
That's
exists
just life.
exists here and there, but it doesn't exist as the normal state for most people most of the time. And it,
But that's not possible. That's
not
not
yet.
manufacturable, first
Not
of
yet,
all.
but it
And
is
second of all,
manufacturable.
if you don't have enough suffering to contrast the good, you're not going to be able to enjoy the good.
I don't
Well,
agree with
very
that at
well.
all. I don't agree with that.
Have you not watched The Good Place yet?
Oh, I've watched some of it. No, that's something I don't like about it. But go on. I don't agree with this argument though.
You
I
have to
don't
watch the
agree that you
finale
need
of this
suffering to
show.
feel pleasure. I think that's people love like symmetry, and I don't believe that. I think we could have only happiness.
Yeah, and you wouldn't get bored out of your mind, or also simply get used to it.
No, but then you just have more of it or something different.
Oh, man. It's so impossible. It's so naive of you to think that that's possible.
I
What
don't
would that
understand why you
even?
think that.
I just think it's inconceivable. I don't think there's anything that could look like that doesn't end up wearing off or becoming kind of repulsive or just being unnatural.
What it might have to do with is an awareness that it's kind of a game. I mean, I'm trying to imagine a character going through a period of suffering, and how would they manage not to feel in a moment like that life wasn't worth living? They'd have to be able to convince themselves that it was temporary and that there's happiness on the way. It's almost like this vision is almost the type that is described in Buddhism. Imagine that that's the perfect way of existing, the kind of Buddhist ideal of accepting that life is a play. There are ups and downs and everything. What about constructing a society where many people, where everybody understood that and everybody was walking around kind of enlightened and like a Buddha? Wouldn't that be a nice society? And then you have some people who got bored of that and would fuck it up and would do terrorist attacks and awful things and everything. But I don't know. It seems like a more joyful society and a more worthwhile place to be than what we have right now. And I think if we can engineer that for a few billion years, it would make the current suffering 300 years worth it. Yeah.
This is okay. This is a completely different hope. This is like a Buddhist world, which low key, yeah, that would be so cool. But that wouldn't take wealth or anything or progress or anything. Like we could do that tomorrow by just making everyone meditate every day, you know?
Well, how do we
Um,
make everybody meditate every day?
just add Buddhist monks to schools or something, like just add it to the curriculum. convert everybody, do the Buddhist crusades.
So we'd have to change human nature to want that.
Are you looking into like biogenetic engineering?
Yeah. I wrote a whole note a few days ago on like we're either going to have to change humans or we're going to have to change society. Probably both. Because if we just take what we have at the moment in our minds and just play it out for a few decades, might not look pretty. So probably we do need to change how we are. Why?
You're cheating.
Why?
If you change the genes of humans, we're not talking about humans anymore. You can't be like, oh, we're great. We do need some genetic engineering, but we're great. We should exist.
No, but who's going to do the genetic engineering? It's only us. We're the only ones who can do it. Lions aren't going to wake up tomorrow and say, do you know what? DNA exists. That's not going to happen. So we are the bottleneck. We're the only hope we have for our future cyborg selves.
Why don't we just never exist? It'll be so much easier. And also, by the way, I think, no, let's finish this point first, because I have a second point afterwards. I think that, so you're not saying humanity isn't going to fix its own problems. Humanity is going to create a creature that will compensate its problems.
Yeah.
But then humanity can still die and it'd be better.
Yeah. Or we could hitch our wagon to this new species. We could make ourselves better. And you could say, oh, we won't be humanity anymore. But we are the only hope of that future thing existing, which is why I'm saying we should hang on.
So you're kind of like, oh, the damage is already done and the only way to fix it is to... Okay, so I'm kind of in a damage prevention. Yeah. I'm kind of in a damage control mode, and you're kind of in a let's fix it mode.
Yeah. I think so. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
It's worse. Yeah. Because I also think that it's what's not cool about your idea is that it's going to take so many more years than what we've already existed to make up for. It's going to take so much longer to make enough good to make up for the bad that we've done, which shows that the bad that we've done is like so much worse than if we'd never existed.
Let me say something actually that I think will change the calculus a lot. So let's say that we get rid of all humans, okay? Tomorrow, your dream comes true. What do we have left on the planet? We have billions of animals going around fucking eating each other. Just eating each other and dying painful deaths and getting diseases and drowning and freezing and burning in forest fires. It's a fucking hellscape in the wild. And the world isn't going to be some utopia if we're not here either. So it's not like humans exist and it's bad versus utopia. There's humans exist and it's bad, humans don't exist and it's bad, or humans continue to exist and maybe it's good. And I'm saying weigh all those three things up, and I'm betting on that third one because that's the one that has the only hope of greater happiness than suffering.
You made a mistake there. It's humans don't exist and it's bad.
Yeah.
Humans exist and it's horrific.
We might disagree on the degree of badness of humans existing. Like on a scale of, let's say that humans don't exist. I don't know. Okay, the current situation, we'll say that's 100 bad, or just 100 on a scale of 0 to 100, because the worst it could be. The current situation is 100. What's the situation where humans are just taken out of the equation?
Oh, I don't think the current situation is 100.
No, but I was saying like set that as 100. You do think it's the worst of all three of those scenarios?
Oh, okay, yeah. But it's not the worst it could be.
No, yeah. But say it's 100, like, because we have to normalize the other two against it.
Okay. Well, then it's 50.
Really? You think half of the suffering in the world would go away if humans stop existing?
Well, my view of it is that it would be balanced if we weren't here.
Balanced in what way?
As in the good and the bad would balance each other out.
How?
Because that's the way nature works. That's the way physics works,
We're
right?
nature. We're part of nature.
Yeah, but not really. Not
No.
anymore.
This is like human exceptionalism. Like we're somehow apart from nature.
We've exited the cycle, the natural cycle. We moved our position in the food chain.
Imagine lots of animals move their position in the food chain. Imagine if you were an alien species who was like you think of a chimpanzee versus us, there's like 2% difference in our DNA. Imagine a species that was 2% smarter than us. They would say those humans think they've exited the food chain, but they're very much on a chain that they don't even realize that they're on. Chimpanzees would probably think something analogous at their level of thinking to that they've exited the food chain. We groom each other. We laugh at things. You know, they think they're all high and mighty. Well, so do we as humans. You're committing the same kind of what would you call it, haughtiness that you would accuse other people of by saying that humans are somehow separate from nature.
No. Okay. Um. So I don't think all animals feel the way that we do about ourselves and in relation to the world, because we are different in our relationship to the world.
Okay, sorry.
Because
Can I zoom back a bit? I think I have a way to get us really quickly on the point.
Okay, you're completely misunderstanding my view of humans, but okay, go on.
Okay, so if we disappeared, you think 50% of the suffering in the world would disappear, right?
Not exactly, but I think it would go. I think it's off balance now, and would go back into balance if we disappeared.
Balance. I think there's like a romanticism in your point of view about the state of nature. I think you think if it's just in balance, if it's in homeostasis, if spiders are eating their young and crabs are falling off cliffs and donkeys are being eaten by tigers, it's balance. And I like that. I like balance. It's like, no, you have to think about the suffering and the happiness of the individual creatures within that world. It's a hellscape. You would hate to be a hare among foxes.
I just think I guess this is a difference in values, really, because I think that we're playing God, and I don't think we should play God, because there's this beautiful intro to a movie called The Gods Must Be Crazy, and it opens with sort of explanation of the modern world, and it explains that humans are, the only animals who, to this extent, have, instead of adapting to their environment, adapted their environment to themselves.
Yeah.
But the thing is that in adapting the environment to themselves, they've created an environment in which they have to adapt to things all day long.
Yeah.
So like you wake up in the morning because your alarm clock rang instead of waking up with the sun, and then you have to get out of your cozy bed and into the wet shower, and then you have to, eat when your stomach is still not awake yet, and then you have to get into your car and you have to be in traffic and be upset, and like all these things that we've done to make our lives better have actually made our lives worse. And that's shown also very well in Sapiens, about how we didn't tame wheat tamed us. And how actually farming just made our lives so much worse than it used to be on a day-to-day basis. And it's kind of, all of this is just kind of, since the very beginning, we've been playing God by being like, you know what, I don't like this external thing, so I'm going to change it instead of adapting to it. And it's always blown up in our face. It's always gotten worse because there's always other factors you're not thinking about. And the culmination of that now is that we're like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna just like cut down all the forests to make more food, it'll be fine. And then all of a sudden the seas are rising and you're like, what?
This is almost like an XCSD comic or whatever the acronym is.
A what?
You know those comics like XDSD or something like that? Comics, the Stickmen?
ASCF movies?
No, they're really good too. But anyway, sorry, go on.
No, I don't know those.
No.
So yeah, and it just kind of goes to show that, I mean, those are the reasons why I'm weary of playing God. And that's why I
Mm.
value the balance of nature so much, because those are things that fall into place with the sort of laws of physics. And that's the way in which we've exited the laws of nature, by trying to change the world.
Yeah. Where I agree with you and I disagree with you. Where I agree with you is that the current state, the way we normally change things, often blows up in our face. Where I disagree with you is that I would prefer a world where we continue to try and change things and make it better than the state of nature, which I think is not as rosy as you paint.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I see what you mean. I think if we can make a world that where everyone's happy all the time, that would be great. But I think that we have enough evidence to know that us playing God and us trying to control things to that extent is not possible. And it's not possible to create a world where everyone's happy like that.
Well, it doesn't
You
need
can
to be
create a
everyone, it
world.
just needs to be most.
I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. Well, that's not something that we can find out, though, if it's possible or not.
Sure,
But I
but I guess
really think
then we
that
have to we have to disagree about the how good the state of nature is, how good things are by default, you know, because you think that they're preferable to us experimenting, and I think I'd rather try out a few things with our species and our planet to make things better, because as far as I'm concerned, they're pretty awful to begin with. I'm really glad I wasn't born 30,000 years ago and like was one of 15 siblings, most of whom died.
I don't know.
I don't even speak English. I'm just like blah, 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 blah.
I don't know, man. I don't think. First of all, I'm pretty sure Homo sapiens talked.
Yeah, but not English.
No.
Yes, good day, fellow caveman. Hello, hooga, hooga. Or cavemen weren't 15,000 years ago. Sorry, cavemen were before that.
Yeah. Look, I might.
You what?
I
You
might
late?
prefer it.
You late
Yeah,
to the party?
you lived in the moment, you know. You lived in a small community. You lived with your family, and sure, people died, but you never had to like not commit because they're gonna move to Australia next year. Like,
Very specific example.
um, yeah, I don't know. I think there was probably less existential dread at the time in
Yeah.
terms of meaning and stuff,
More
because
dread of tigers, though. Which would you prefer?
yeah, well, it's easier to deal with. Just deal with the tiger instead of dealing with the fact that you will die. You know?
Yeah, and at least back then you probably believed that you'd go on to live or be reborn or have some kind of afterlife, whereas we don't really believe that as much now.
Mm.
I don't know. It's something that I've wondered about myself, whether I would actually have been happier, 10,000 years ago, because we really don't know. We have no mood trackers. I mean, we can look at their life objectively as best as we can and imagine ourselves in that situation. But the thing is, they didn't know about what was coming down the line, and so all they knew was what they had around them in that moment. And you would imagine that, like, as a species, we're adapted to live in the environment that we grew up in, and our minds are adapted to live in that environment. And so it could well be that people were just as happy then as they are now, and that we have only changed our sources of unhappiness and happiness, but we haven't
Mm.
actually changed the net amount of happiness or unhappiness in our lives. Which is why I say the only answer out of this is to change ourselves, to change human nature, to make ourselves. I mean, there are people in the world, I've read up on this online, who are by default happy. Their default state is one of happiness. And they have all the same, existential questions as everybody else and the same ups and downs that everybody has, but their baseline mood is like an 8 out of 10. And it can, like, they're quirks of nature, by the way. These people aren't that common. I've only come across two of them online, but they both share pretty similar experiences, and they're not psychopaths, or there's nothing off about them. Although one of them does have a few genetic rarities, like they're very sensitive to temperature, which may be associated, they think, with that rarity in affect. But it's possible to imagine, once we understand the genetics behind stuff like that, to change ourselves in such a way that our baseline mood is happier, our baseline sociability, intelligence, the things that we value in other people, it could be that they're made better and that we live in a more happy, well-adjusted society because of it. I think that won't happen. This conversation has made me realize that I don't think that's possible until we change ourselves. It's probably not doable by changing society, because by changing society, we just keep on. I just think we're kind of moving the goalposts by changing society. We should change ourselves. By God, a little bit.
Yeah, so you lose.
What?
So you lose.
What do I lose? Oh no!
Because if you have to change humanity, or humanity,
that's a cheaty win. That's such a cheaty win, Delphine.
No, it's a cheaty win if you win like that. Because of course, if we can change our genetics to make ourselves better, and then we make the world great, and it's paradise for billions of years. Of course, keep humans. I mean, that's a cheaty win.
No, the question is it within our capability to do that? Because I believe humans are capable of bringing that out, and if we extinguish ourselves, we won't be there to make those changes, and all that will be left is dumb antelopes, and they won't do shit. I hate antelopes.
Dude, okay. First of all, if we don't do it and if we get eradicated, there will be another eventually super intelligent species.
Not necessarily, because
give it a few billion years.
How many species are there? There are billions of species. How many intelligent ones like us arose? Just one. We actually don't know how rare an event we are.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't know how special we are.
Dude, no. Just no.
What?
And I really, really, really wonder who our viewers are gonna side with, because this is so. I feel like. Okay, let me just say my second point about what you were saying. You make a good point about happiness and about moving the goalpost. This, in fact, is also in Sapiens. He talks in the last chapter about happiness and how it's a weird one, because no one's tried to measure happiness until, like 100, not even 100 years ago, and no one's really talked about happiness before, like. I mean, okay, we've talked about happiness generally, but it's not really been a factor in how we see the world. But from what we know about genes and what you said, how people have a different baseline mood, people actually also have a different maximum and minimum of happiness. And whether you're born, and if that's really genetic, like whether you're born now or whenever, you have the same highest and the same lowest. So if you think about a successful lawyer in a happy marriage with 3 kids that he loves nowadays, his happiest day isn't affected by that any more than it's affected by his genes. So if you compare him to a farmer from 400 years ago, who genetically is a higher happy and a lower low, or a higher low, this poor farmer who's gonna die of gout, and they don't have kids because they all died, he'll still have a higher high than the successful lawyer from nowadays. So progress, technology, all our super intelligence doesn't really have such an important effect on our happiness.
I think that's a really good point that's not talked about in most discussions like this, which is the value of podcasts like this one. But I think that's all true until the second some result comes out of a lab where we've genetically engineered a happier human by default, where we've genetically engineered the farmer that you're talking about. That's it.
Okay. There's a movie. I forget what it's called. It's an old French movie about the scientist who's figured out how to cancel suffering in people. And he started on chimps, and he did it to humans. And it's a really interesting movie because well, first of all, the chimps at the start, you're like looking at this chimp and you're like, damn, he's just so chill and happy all the time and just doesn't care, and you know, it's great. And halfway through the movie, once a lot of people have had the treatment, so many people are queuing up to get it, in the cage with the chimp who's had the treatment, all the other chimps go completely ballistic and just get so angry at this guy who's just never upset about anything. And it's kind of a foreshadowing, because at the end of the movie, it's like the people who are still normal are like see it like a dystopian thing. And the happy people even start forcing the non-happy people, because they're kind of a problem. And they're like, well, there's a clear solution, we just have to I think the word they use was flash them. We just have to flash them as well, and then they'll be fine, you know. And the people who are still themselves are like, don't do this to me because this is freaky and that's not me and that's not, you know. So there is I think we're trying to, I think this is my discomfort with your arguments, is that they're very mathematical and they're very like, yeah, we can genetically engineer ourselves to be happy and make up for all the pain. Like, okay, cool, but I don't think that happiness is the same as happiness that is actually experienced by a genetically authentic human. And I would be interested to see your reaction to that movie, because when you watch that movie, you're like, objectively, the flashed people are so much better off because there are no side effects. But you're just watching this guy, and in the beginning of the movie, it starts with this guy who's making a sort of video diary, and he's paralyzed from the waist down, and his best friend is sleeping with his wife in the next room, and he's just like, man, I'm so happy. And you're just like, you're kind of like, I mean, I was like, oh, cool, you know, this guy's got it all figured out. But then you find out why, and you're like, it really makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's you can't necessarily explain it, but it is a notion that we have instinctively, that if it's like simulated happiness is worth less than genuine happiness.
I think like a key thing here is we kind of have to wonder about why we're happy. We can't just be happy and forget about it and be happy like a kid. We have to be happy like a person who it's their second time falling in love, and they're like, you know, we have to be a little bit wary. And once we're a little bit wary, we'll make society in such a way that we have to understand that it must be sustainable, that the happiness that we seek can't be this blissful, wheelchaired, stoned happiness, because life can't continue like that forever in a sustainable way. We have to sustain a society. And also, this is kind of like an old-fashioned concept, but have some level of respect for our dignity. Have some dignity, and maybe keep that aspect of our humanity. I mean, to me, the example that you described about that guy in that movie, he is happy, but he completely lacks dignity, and I completely lack the ability to respect him. I just feel sorry for him. And we could change humanity so that we lost the ability to feel respect or lack of respect and lost the sense of dignity. But when we do this experimenting on ourselves, we're going to have to experiment with some things before other things. And one of those things is happiness. And we can maybe toy around with dignity and respect later if it comes to it. But I see it as possible to create a happier human who lives in a society which, like the video games I described earlier on, are gamed in such a way that it's possible to have an exciting and interesting and scary and fun and engaging and risky time while still being able to cope with all that. Think of a person that's maximally engaged in their life. Like, what does that look like? There's somebody who has risk and somebody who has sadness, happiness, joys and sorrows, and everything that's part of being human. But the characteristic of them that makes them well adapted to their life is they're tenacious and tough and courageous, and they're hardy, and they have a lot of self-belief. They're, a tough person who can make it through the world. It's not an easy or a happy existence necessarily, but it's a strong and a good and a respectable, definitely fulfilling existence. I think you could create a world where more people were like that, and you could create a society where there were more opportunities to be like that. And that might be the better world that we're looking for, not one where everybody is in a state of bliss all along. Because that movie, the criticism of that movie is a criticism of our simplistic view of happiness, that we can either be happy or sad, and that ideal happiness is bliss. But maybe a more nuanced or complicated understanding of well-being includes more facets than happiness alone, but also includes the ability to exercise classical virtues like courage. And so the issue with our conversation here might be an over focus on simplistic vision of utopia.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah, I think I agree with that view of a utopia, that it's not just about net happiness. I don't really think that's a measurable thing. But where does that leave us with regards to humanity?
I think it leaves me winning, because let me say, without being jokey, where do I think it leads us? I think if we both agree, and maybe do we both agree that vision just there is a good vision for the future of humanity? Whether it's achievable or not is another thing, but the idea that if we could achieve it, it would be worthwhile. Do we both agree on that?
I agree on the what.
What do you mean?
How is
okay? The how is
there's
another
no
issue.
how, but
yeah. But I'd say it's worth taking a chance that it's within our capacity to create such a world, because all of us have elements of those things in us already, and the world has people who are like that, and the world has situations which enable people like that to act like that and live like that. And all we can do is create a society that is geared towards providing more of those opportunities, and in so doing, or through other means, creating more of those people. And a society which is full of people like that would be a better society to live in than what we have at the moment. Would probably be worthwhile. I mean, if everybody lived like that, that would be pretty good.
And that would be enough to compensate for the animal suffering?
Yeah.
What would the animals get out of this?
Well, we could do the same for the animals. I think it would be easier to make animals happy than to make humans happy. Happy not as in happy, but as in the kind of fulfillment that we were just talking about there. Like, maybe what a pig needs is an obstacle course with a good trough at the end, Maybe that's all they need, a problem to solve. Or we could probably find out what makes a pig feel like their life is worthwhile. And if not, we'll kill them and there won't be any pigs.
That's problematic.
Why?
Kill off the unhappy ones?
Yeah. Their lives aren't worth living. And I thought here I'm saying your point of view, that we should kill off the unhappiness.
If you do that, you're exchanging lives for your equation.
Huh?
For the net happy. What kind of utopia has such a lack of morality?
Where's the lack of morality in that? Put them out.
Kill the unhappy pigs.
Yeah, kill the unhappy pigs. They're unhappy. They want to die. Or make them happy. If you could make them happy, make them happy. But if you can't make a miserable pig happy, if a pig has lost its limbs and is rolling around on its stumps, I say kill it.
So many science fiction writers are slapping themselves right now.
Tell me why that's wrong.
I saw a Doctor Who episode about where they land on this planet, like a resort. And I think it was like a base where they were keeping people safe for a while for whatever reason, and there was no one left. It was deserted, and there was this robot, and the robot was like, I'm here to like take care of you, basically. It was like your host. And basically, whenever they were always trying to make you happy, and they were always checking if you were happy. And whenever you were like upset or like crying, or things were really bad, it would like have like a red sad face instead of the yellow, the smiley face that it had before, and it would kill you.
Oh my god!
Because they're like, you're happy, you're not bringing enough happiness. But then obviously everyone saw their friends die and started crying, and then they just killed everyone.
Yeah, that's a response to my argument. I mean, the reason that episode is written is exactly the same reason that you're mentioning this episode now. It's an objection to my argument, absolutely.
Exactly, because you're a robot.
Because I'm a robot, yeah. But no, look, their view of robots is too simplistic. Like,
yeah, no, I agree.
A real robot, one of my robots, would take into account the potential future of happiness for that pig. Not just the happiness of that pig in any given moment and kill it if it's sad, but it would take into account, can we make this pig happier in the future? If yes, then save pig. If no, then kill pig. And if the pig gets sad that it's going to die, or if other people get sad based on that pig being killed, the computer will know, okay, don't kill that pig. Let that pig suffer so that the other pigs may be happy. This is ultimately a trade-off, and it is at the end of this, any argument boils down to the maths of pain and pleasure.
I feel like this entire conversation is just you writing a science fiction novel without the science.
Only fiction.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, here we have a computer that solves this problem.
Oh, like, yeah. Oh, listen, like, I totally accept that this computer may never exist, right? But I don't want to give up on it already. Wait a few hundred years. It's an instant.
I don't think... Well, you cannot agree. I get that you might be like, okay, we have to hold on, should have the time to fix the suffering we've created. But you cannot argue that waiting for the slim chance of billions of years of paradise is better than us never having existed at all.
I'm more likely to agree with you if by us you mean every sentient creature on the planet, not just humans.
You don't think we've done more harm than other animals?
No. I think bacteria have done the most harm. Bacteria and viruses. Because they've caused loads of human and animal suffering, more than we have, by infections and diseases.
Okay, sentient animals.
Well, we don't know what...
Stop writing science fiction novels.
We can build a computer that can detect the level of sentience.
Yeah. This is like me when I was a kid. I used to think an inventor would have a like giant... It wasn't even a workshop. It was a desert, and there was a big rock in the middle of the desert, and there were all these workers in the field. And I would go up on the rock and say, "Build a time machine." And they would just do it. Because I thought an inventor was the guy who comes up with the ideas, and a builder is the one who does the building. I didn't think about the engineering aspect.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of dumb.
Yeah, I'm just computer version of that. All of my arguments have rested on computers. But look, that's because we're in the computer age. Back a few hundred years ago, we would have been talking about demons. I would be resting on demons and angels. But the point is, the thing that angels and demons and computers have in common, it's this ability to calculate that we don't have with our current knowledge. One historical point, though, is that there are things that we used to wish we could calculate that we now can, like the movement of the planets, the movement of spaceships and so on. We used to wish we could calculate those. And you would have been like, oh, computer calculating the orbit of the Earth. And now a computer can do that. And so we don't know what the computers of the future will be capable of doing. So in that way, they're not analogous to the demons of the past because they're achievable.
Look.
So don't ridicule my damn computers, my damn silicone.
Listen. Here's my conclusion.
Right. We should finish up soon, by the way. We should finish up soon.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Your entire argument is based on what ifs. And my argument is based on what has happened and hard evidence. So I
Uh,
win.
I think the failure point in your argument is the point where you say, if humans just stopped existing, we would return to a balanced state of nature where things would be fine. I think you're discounting the suffering that happens by default in the world.
No, I don't think things would be fine. I don't think things would be perfect. I
Right.
don't think perfection is something to strive
Not
for.
even perfect. I mean, to me, that's a hellscape. To me, it's
I
hell on earth, the
I
way
think
things
things would be better.
are. Right. No, I don't think so. But
Not for
that's how we
humans.
started off. No, not for. I mean, the hope of animals lies in us as well.
No, no, I'm talking about the present.
Yeah, but
Compared today,
we can't just talk about the present.
well, do it for a minute.
Okay, okay, do it for the present.
I'm talking about the present because we're comparing us being here now and
Mm,
us not being here now.
yeah, you're
That's,
constricting it a lot by just saying that. But
well, I'm
I
answering
agree.
your point
Then
because
I
you're trying
agree.
to
Then I agree.
because you're I'm just trying to address your point of me saying that a hellscape is better than now.
Okay.
And I'm like, yeah, is a
Okay,
hellscape
is the
better than
hellscape better
now?
than now? Yeah, I think the world without us would be better than the world with us. Not for animals. Okay, for farmed animals. Mostly for humans. I think if you
Well,
sum up the human well-being and suffering, I think most human lives would be better off not to have existed. Like, yeah. So even not even thinking of other animals, and we should think of other animals because of factory farming, which is our fault. But even just thinking about humans, I agree, we'd be better off not to exist. Yeah.
mhm.
So all my argument does rest on the future. My belief in our capability to do the right thing.
Mhm.
But again, we're back where we started. Where is our how do we weigh up the odds of us achieving these different outcomes? We've both agreed, using the example of the ideal person living in the ideal way at the moment, the kind of motivated, engaged, happy, and fulfilled but challenged person. We agree
Mhm.
that that's a good way to live. We agree that it's possible that that will exist in the future, but we disagree about the likelihood of that being the case for most sentient creatures at some point in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
The really where we disagree here is the likelihood of, we won't call it utopia, but the likelihood of a worthwhile way of the world in 1,000 years' time. And
But
not just,
if humanity was to end today or never have existed, we agree that it would be better if we hadn't existed.
I think so. Do you feel satisfied at all by that? I don't feel like we made
Yeah.
any progress here.
I feel
Apart
like
from,
I won.
oh, we'll let the listeners decide.
Yeah, I really feel like we should put a poll on Twitter or
Okay.
something.
We'll see who gets more votes, more emails in.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed this conversation. This has been episode 2 of the Two Peas in a Pod cast. This has been Emmett Fearick and Delphine Joyce. We're glad you joined. We look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future while humanity is still a wreck. Bye-bye.
Bye.